Hello, it's Professor Jorbs here. I am not technically a professor, but I wanted to make a little video talking about the way that I am going about approaching playing Teamfight Tactics, because I've had quite a few viewers say that they really enjoy watching me play Teamfight Tactics and games in general because I approach them in a different way from most people. And I want to explain how I approach them and why I approach them that way. And so to do that, hopefully in like just 10-15 minutes, I'm going to talk about the perfect teamfight tactics player, because that's what I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be as close to that as possible as I play this game and learn this game. I'm trying to work out how I'm going to become that player as fast as I can. So if we think about a perfect robotic player for teamfight tactics, they can do everything perfectly. They can always work out what everybody has on every board nearly instantly. And so for them, they can gather a lot of information that's very difficult for humans to gather to make their decisions with. So their decisions are going to be able to be like more accurate and more intricate. I'm going to counter what this player is doing on this other board by doing this thing. They can perfectly spend their gold every turn in the best way possible. So that like scramble to roll your gold as quickly as possible and like missing units sometimes when you're looking for like 6 different things and you just forget about one of them, that would never happen for a perfect robotic player. But on top of that, I think the way that humans often roll gold is they sort of decide in advance what they're going to be rolling for and then they look for it. And maybe you're looking for several different units. But a perfect robotic player would actually, every time they rolled, did look at the cards that they saw right now and did think like, do these cards change the strategy that I should be pursuing? And they may actually change what they're rolling for actually more than once. They could change what they were rolling for as they went through rolling through their cards. I think this happens fairly often in Teamfight Tactics as you transition from early game to mid game. You often have to roll down to stay alive and assemble some sort of strong comp, and often you have very little direction in terms of which comp you want. And getting through 40 or 50 gold, rolling that all down, and building a team that like has the right number of tanks, the right amount of damage, works well with the items you have so far, that's really, really hard when you don't really have that much direction because maybe your pieces that you have right now aren't that great. A perfect robot is never going to have any issue with that. They're not going to have to think up a strategy beforehand, like I'm looking for elementalists and sorcerers specifically. They'll just look at the cards they have every time, and they'll be like, oh, I can get 4 brawlers, and my damage can come from a couple of rangers who I see here, and boom, all of a sudden they've got a comp, and then they roll some more, and they're like, I didn't manage to 2-star my rangers, but I see that I have an Aurelian Soul and a Shyvana, and I can stack the Aurelian Soul with damage items, and that will be my damage. Or I don't know. This is just an example, but a perfect robot could do that, where not many players are able to do that right now. Not many human players, maybe no human players. And a perfect robotic player is also going to understand everything about which comps are going to beat which other comps, where to position perfectly to take advantage of the other compositions, what to build in order to maximize its chances to win. And everything that it's going to be doing is about maximizing its chances to win. It's never going to have fun. It's never going to make 3-star Fiora just because that's cool. It's just a cutthroat player that really wants to win every single time. And I mean, maybe that is fun for you. But a robot's definitely oriented solely toward winning. So humans can't do this. They can't be the perfect player. We've got limitations on our attention and memory, which make it very difficult to succeed at these things in a limited time environment. It's very hard for us to roll down and do everything perfectly. It's very hard for us every single round to look at what we have, build the strongest team for this round, and position it in the strongest way to counter the 7 potentially other comps that are in the game with us. That's just a lot of work. Even in early rounds, that can be a lot of work, and as you get later into the mid game, that's really hard sometimes. And we can't calculate deeply enough into the game to solve exactly which comp will be best for different situations. We don't necessarily know this is the right situation to go for 4 rangers and 4 knights, or glacial, or whatever. We have some intuition, we have some experience, we can think in the past this thing worked for me, but we don't have the ability to just sit there and be this imaginary machine which can actually like create a computer matrix game analysis system and say, okay, this comp has a 32% chance of winning and that one has a 33% chance of winning, so we go for that one. As humans, we just don't have the ability to do either of these two things. And so there are ways that we try to bandage the fact that we can't achieve that. Because when we're not doing the stuff that is necessarily part of winning as much as possible, we have to do something else instead, right? But if we're going to do something else instead, and it's not the thing that wins us the game as much as possible, we want to try to make it the thing that wins us the game as much as possible within our abilities. One thing that humans do in order to achieve this is use what I am going to call here restrictive human solutions. Restrictive human solutions, to me, are things which solve a problem for you now with the knowledge you have now, but make it very hard for you to learn more and improve more and get better and better and better at the game. One example of a restrictive human solution is imagining archetypes or builds which we follow, whether they make sense right now or not. So we're thinking about, we saw an infographic that showed us how to put together certain pieces and which items to build in those pieces, and we're just going to do that right now. But often this won't work because the other comps in the game counter those pieces this time, or our items don't quite fit with those pieces, so actually we should be doing something else. Or even like we're pretty close to having all the right stuff in line for building those pieces, but some little thing that's going on right now in this game that's unique means that we should do it in a slightly different way from usual. And if we're not thinking about that stuff, if we're just practicing doing the same strategy that we think of as like, this is our strategy and we're aiming at it as our target, it's going to be really hard for us to get better. And it's going to be really hard for us to come closer and closer to making the true best play. We're going to get better and better at executing this one strategy, and maybe we'll win more than we did before because maybe the strategy's like pretty good, but it's going to be hard to get better than pretty good. Another thing that humans have to do sometimes, because we need some sort of solution, is we sometimes have to make decisions without collecting all of the information that we need. So for example, when we roll for units, we might do it without actually knowing everything about what compositions our opponents are playing. Or we might not know for sure as we're rolling. There are 13 total copies of brand in the game, and we might see one brand, and we might have been thinking, you know, we're going to roll for rangers and knights, but then we see the brand and we're like, oh, maybe we can go for elementalists. But in that moment, how likely is it that without even thinking about brands before now, how likely is it that we know how many brands other players have? Because that makes a difference. If other players have 6 brands right now, there are only 7 brands total left for us to get. And that makes it way harder for us to hit more of them. If they don't have any brands, hey, there's like twice as many brands in the pool, basically, and it's like pretty wide open. Maybe we should go for it. But we're very regularly not going to know that information because we don't have big enough brains to grab it all. We're going to position for fights without checking how our opponents are positioned. I often get asked while I'm streaming, how do you position? Why do you position that way? Why do you prefer to have this piece in the corner over that piece? And the questions are often coming from the point of view that it's something that I always do. But generally it's because I've looked around the game and seen what comps other people are playing, and I've tried to put my pieces in a way that's sensible to beat those other comps. And where my pieces should go could change as the comps that are in the game change. And so this is something that I'm not perfect at. I'm human. I can't do that perfectly every round. But I don't even have in my head a thing that's like, oh yeah, if I have these pieces, this is how I should set them up. Because I never bother making that thing in my head. I don't dedicate brain space to having a thing like that because I'm trying to think about in each situation where there are other comps that are doing certain things, in that situation, how would I set my team up to counter how that comp works instead? So I'm coming at it from a less restrictive point of view, I think. And then like deciding big strategic things like whether we're hyper rolling or whether we're going for economy and stuff like that without checking how strong the other teams are in the lobby. Sometimes you're like running out of time, you're down to like 10 health, you've only got so much gold, and you're having to make a decision like, do I try to survive right now and get fifth in this lobby, or am I actually in a spot where I just got quite a lot stronger and now I'm actually safe for a while? Maybe I could try to get third in this lobby. There are some really interesting strategic decisions with trying to get different placements depending on how strong you are and how much risk you want to take on, which are very hard to actually interact with because we don't have enough time. And so often humans are just sort of like going with something. So I think that all of these solutions can make us better for a while, but they restrict how much we can improve later. And instead of doing stuff like that, what I try to use as I get better at this game are what I call empowering human solutions instead of restrictive human solutions. And I think that these are often harder to improve with immediately, but that they are much, much, much more powerful leverage tools in the long run for getting really good at the game later. I give myself a lot of like slack and leeway when I do this. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to make my brain do something really difficult. I accept that. I'm not going to take any shortcuts. I'm going to like really try to get good at this game. It's okay if I lose and make mistakes and stuff while I'm learning. This is always how I approach a game. It's okay to lose as I'm learning. You learn lessons from your mistakes and you learn what went wrong when you lose. It's actually somewhat harder to learn things when you're winning than it is when you're losing, I think, because you don't see all of the things that you could improve on very easily if you win the lobby. So some empowering human solutions that I use, I try to get away from using the interfaces for games and try to get information into my brain. So games use interfaces to show you the information that you need to know. And that's really cool, right? But the thing is that, especially in a game like Teamfight Tactics, you have limited time to make all of your decisions. And so if I need to know how many brands are left in the pool, I can do that by scrolling through all the other players' boards and counting their brands. What I'm trying to do, though, is just know. Just keep track as the game goes of what everybody else has. And then I just know there are 2 players who have brands right now. Knowing exactly which pieces I have on the board, exactly what item components I have, exactly what completed items I have, exactly what pieces I have on my bench, knowing all of this stuff without having to look and check means that I can play a lot faster. And so that's something that I'm slowly working on getting better and better at. And there's a lot of stuff to know in this game because there are 8 boards to think about. And even just thinking about your own board is already pretty complicated. But this is something that I'm trying to get better and better at. And I'm trying to get better and better at just speeding through the boards, like boom, 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 looking at 7 of them, and gathering that information really, really quickly, and then holding it and remembering it as I go. Another way to empower yourself to get better at the game is rather than trying to avoid nuance and practice a strategy that you've learned that can work, to explore nuance. When something unique and different happens, see if you can work out a way to make that thing do something good, hopefully. But even if it doesn't do something good, maybe just try to use that thing, and if it goes poorly, well, now you know that it goes poorly, and maybe you know why. And maybe if you see somebody else trying to do it later, you'll know what's going to happen. You'll be better able to judge what you need to worry about from that opponent doing that thing. I got a 5 cost unit at level 6. What would a strategy look like which can leverage this advantage? Just recently, I've had a Nivea game where I got a Nivea very early at level 6, threw some items on her, and won the game, and it was really interesting. Nivea was really good at shutting down enemy carries. She dealt really good damage with Morellonomicon. She was a pretty safe carry herself. She had long auto attack range, and her mana pool was pretty forgiving for getting ultimates off. This was great. Also, recently I got a Karthus at level 6, and I was like, I can try this, but it turns out that level 1 Karthus level 6 is nowhere near as strong, and my attempts to get level 1 Karthus to go off were sort of pigeonholed into trying to get 6 sorcerers because he didn't deal enough damage otherwise, and I had to get a Kindred or a Mordekaiser for Phantom to like justify his inclusion for that. And the items I put on him didn't give me that much stuff, and he didn't feel very safe as a carry. And so that's another thing that I know. And this refines my understanding of what the pieces are and what they do in different situations in very useful ways. Another thing that I know is that in the Karthus game, I was against, I believe, 3 different assassin comps. And so I was getting paired against assassins who jumped into my backline quite a bit, and that threatened my ability for Karthus to do that much. Whereas in the Anivia game, I was more against ranger comps, which didn't come and try to kill my carry as much. They tried to kill my tanks first and then my carries. And so maybe because of that, Anivia did a little bit more than Karthus would. So there's still a lot of stuff for me to explore with just those 2 pieces in those 2 situations, but I'm exploring that and I'm thinking about that. I'm not thinking about like, how do I build the perfect wild Sork comp? I think lots of people have already thought about that, and I also think that there's a lot more to the game than that. The perfect wild Sork comp is going to be great, but there are also going to be lots of situations where you build something else and it's even better. Another thing that I'm trying to do is understand what thresholds I need to meet to come close to perfect mechanical play, and I'm practicing to achieve them. So for comparisons, think about professional StarCraft players and how they macro. They do things that, as a very casual StarCraft player, I couldn't imagine doing, managing all the different bases and the workers and the production buildings and everything in real time while moving their army around as well. In StarCraft 2, it's a little bit toned down, but still very impressive. Speed chess, people are playing entire games of chess at fairly high levels in like 1 minute of their own clock time. Speedrunning games, if you look at Slay the Spire, which is a game I play a lot, there are people beating Slay the Spire in under 5 minutes sometimes. And all of these things require like thinking and adapting on the fly a decent amount. So when you see that people are able to do this, you can really sort of open your mind and think about what a human can do when a situation arises where they have to like roll down 50 gold, or they have to rearrange their comp to be something else, or something like that. And if you want to be a really good teamfight tactics player, doing that perfectly would be the goal, right? So you should probably start practicing doing it pretty well, to get you some of the way there at least. Maybe get you as close to there as possible is maybe the goal. And then exploring the limitations of the rules of the game instead of imagining arbitrary constraints, I think is really important. So arbitrary constraints is almost a synonym for restrictive human solutions. When the rules of a game are big and complicated, and they can be very arbitrary to a human, the rules of a game, because, we go through life doing all these different things, and all of a sudden we're playing a very specific game with very specific rules which somebody else came up with, and they don't necessarily make sense. Why does this unit's ultimate do this thing? Why does this item interact with this item in a different way than we expected? Sorts of things. So sometimes you can sort of limit yourself and and you like think, okay, a carry has to build these items, sorts of things, and don't think, oh, this item could actually be pretty good in some situations too. You think it's very important to reroll on this turn because it will get you these units, or you think it's very important not to reroll until you get to this level of economy so that you can get a certain amount of economy. It's very important not to level up. It's very important to level up. All of these things, all of these overarching strategies and rules, they're not actually in the game rules. That's something that's in your head that you have made up that's separate from the game. And recognizing which things you're making up that are separate from the game rules and which things are actually the game rules lets you identify where things that aren't true might be. It's always in the things that you made up. So trying to base the things that I'm doing on the actual rules of the game is really important to me. It may be that in some games it is very important to roll a lot on a particular turn, but it might also be that on other games it's very important to roll once or twice on one specific turn. Like it might be really important to hit a 2-star unit and you have 4 different 2-star units you can hit. You just need to get a little bit stronger and it's time to roll. And that could happen at a lot of different points in the game. It could just happen just about anywhere. It's also definitely true that sometimes you might want to econ in situations where it seems risky or something like that. These are 2 different things you can do in this game, generate interest or roll. And when you choose to do them really depends on what's going on in the game, and you get to choose every single game. You get to choose uniquely when the right time is. So that's something that I'm trying really hard to do, is just like keep open-minded. Keep in mind all the things I'm allowed to do and choosing the right times to do them. Instead of coming into a game with a set strategy, it's wrong to do this thing at this time, I'm going to do it at that time instead, that's my set strategy. That's not what I want to be doing. I think that I didn't put this in a slide, but I think that human intuition actually feels very similar to me to how computer AI is trained. And I think that developing an intuition for a game by exploring it fully and keeping an open mind and trying lots of things out and just seeing what happens, I think that's a very, very good way for humans to learn and a very good way to get better at a game. Because going like back here, we have limitations on our attention and memory. We can't calculate deeply enough. A lot of the answers that we're going to have to these problems are going to come down to trusting our intuition in situations where we don't have the ability to actually do the calculations that are necessary. And that means that training our intuition is really important, and that means keeping an open mind and being honest with ourselves about what things are working, what things aren't working, and what things we're not trying enough and need to be trying. So that's what I'm up to. That's how I'm trying to become the best teamfight tactics player that I can be. I'm realistic, like I'm a good strategy player, but I'm not a StarCraft player, so rolling's always going to be difficult for me, so I don't know if I'm going to be the best teamfight tactics player in the world, but I'm trying to be the best teamfight tactics player that I can be, and that's really important to me. That's what drives me and what is interesting to me. And I think no matter your skill level at games, if you come to a game and interact with it like this, keeping an open mind, trying to push yourself to do as much as you can and leave the door open to improve even further, I think that's a really great way to have fun with games. And I think it's a way to have fun with games and to learn lessons from games that you can take away from the game and apply to the rest of your life as well. So, thanks for hanging out. I hope to see you next time.